7:00, here we go. Beth is here, and, well, yep. Okay. Call this meeting to order. This is meeting number 23 of the Advisory Finance Committee for fiscal year 23. Today is Monday, March 6, 2023. Pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote access in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body, as well as members of the public, may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at the meeting location posted on the AFC website, and it is possible that any or all members of the public body may attend remotely, with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting may also be accessed remotely via the link posted on the Advisory Committee agenda posted on the Advisory Committee's website. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely as noted above. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Westborough TV, Verizon Channel 28 or Charter Channel 192, and concurrently recorded, and as soon as possible after the meeting, posted on the Westborough TV YouTube website. Welcome, everyone. Again, the first order of business this evening is to review Articles 27, 28, 29, and 37. Helping us do that will be Chris Payant, Director of the Department of Public Works, and, as I found out today, Commissioner of Water and Sewer. Welcome, Chris.
And on the chimed in via Zoom is Derek Sari, our Assistant Director.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Derek. Welcome.
I do not have any sort of presentation. I wasn't quite sure what your questions might be, but certainly we'll dive into anything you want to. And I guess we'll just start however you want to.
Article 27 and walk us through that bylaw that's being proposed on the stormwater.
So what's in the article is a proposed bylaw, and then the article immediately following is the implementation. I'm sure you recall we came and talked to you, I think it was back in January, about introducing this as a potential article. So the article itself, the bylaw, is something that is if it is approved, just so we're clear on what is actually approved at town meeting, that article will authorize the town through the select board to implement a stormwater utility fee. When they do that, how quickly they do that, what those rates end up being, that's all part of the implementation. That is not what people are signing up for at town meeting. So you're not signing up for a specific fee, although we've published what we believe the fee range will likely be. There's still more discussion to be had about that. So that's the first article regarding the bylaw. The second article related is the implementation. So if the bylaw is supported and the town wants to move forward with this process, then we would spend that sum of money, up to $150,000, to implement that bylaw. So we would need external assistance through a consultant, and we'd go through a process where the rate structure is firmly established through the select board, and all the other things that have been discussed previously in terms of abatements and credits and all the exemptions, all of that will be figured out as part of that implementation process. So those are the two articles that are being voted upon. There are questions that have been asked. Some of you participated in the public information session we had recently, that we're still developing responses to, or will be part of the next step. But I guess the important part up front is what you're voting on at town meeting is just not just, but it's the authorization to implement. That's where it ends. And then, all those other details, which are super important, and I recognize that, but there's more time to be discussed. Those things, there's more time to discuss those items. So since we met in January, we went back to the select board. I think it was actually the following night. Some of you participated or were at that meeting. Then later in the month, actually in March, February, mixing up my months here. In February, we had a public information center session across the street at the Forbes building. Not a huge crowd showed up, but we did get some great questions from those that showed up. And we are in the process of turning some of those questions into products that can be shared over the next week or so via Westborough TV and our website and other platforms in the form of graphics, or even we're working on a potential short video clip that can kind of give a quick summary of things to the public prior to town meeting. So I guess that's kind of an intro, but I'm happy to get into any discussion questions from you all.
Questions, Walter?
Thanks. Thanks for the overview. So while it doesn't actually call out the numbers now, I do notice that I think the first time you came, we were discussing multiple different ways of even billing people in different ways. But in here, we now have clearly at least set up that there'll be a tier system with the house sizes. And so while the percentage or how big a small, medium, large aren't set, this at least sets that concept. Is that
Yes.
correctly reading it?
Yes.
Okay. So from that point of view, at least it gives an outline. So what, is there a thought as to this passes and the select board now has to so-called implement this? Is there how would that happen? Is a subcommittee formed? Is it and brought back, or what are the thoughts around that?
Big picture wise, timing, if we wanted to, so our target is that July of next year would be when this would kick off.
Fiscal 25.
Yes.
Okay.
To meet that timeline, we would have to propose to the town in October when we start our budget cycle. So typically our department level budget is due to the town manager in the October timeframe. So we would have to come to the town with that proposal, and then it'd work its way through the channels, and in January we'd see you in the select board and get to where we are today. So big picture wise, that's kind of what we'd be aiming for if that timeline works out. So between now or town meeting, if it's approved, between town meeting and probably the end of summer, we would need to go through the process of fine tuning the details that you just mentioned and the things I've talked about in terms of setting the rates. So the process for that, I think, would be similar to what it has been, which is meaning the DPW would figure out some of the details. The way we've done it to this point over the last 6 months is we brought it to the finance team, which included the chair of the finance committee, solicited feedback through that process, and then participated in meetings with the select board and probably the finance committee as well, I would guess, to get feedback, guidance, kind of steerage left and right, and do those refinements as the process goes. And ultimately, by the end of the summer, we would have a rate structure, a credit manual, and we have answers to any sort of exemptions or credits or any of those sorts of things that we might want to in place.
Okay. Just one more if I might.
No, please, go ahead.
Okay. This is minor, but it's, I think, important to fix. I don't know if you have this with you, but in section 12, severability, there's a typo in that it's missing the word other. So it says invalidity of any section, provision, paragraph, sentence, or clause of this bylaw shall not invalidate any section, blah, blah, blah. And I believe it should say any other section, as the next article does. Or at least somebody should make sure that's not true. Because the way it's written right now doesn't.
May need to settle legal wise, I don't know, hope we don't have to pay for it.
I took a note. I'll
Okay, yeah.
confirm that that's, needs to be edited
In
or
the
not.
in the, I don't know, in the other article that we're gonna get to, in the same thing that said, has that word,
Yep.
which makes more sense. Anyway.
Andrew?
So Chris, I'm sure this came up the earlier meetings that you've had about this, so I apologize not having been able to see those. But the $150,000 that's part of 28, which I'm considering part of this first one, if I may, could you talk about what sort of costs that might cover in terms of setting this up?
It's, so we have to develop a credit manual. It's going to be a document that describes how, if say a commercial property, I'm just using an example,
Of course.
installed some sort of stormwater mitigation system, some system to infiltrate water on site, right? And they paid a lot of money for that. And so we might offer the ability for that property to submit a request that allows them to get credit for that essentially, and so thereby you reduce their bill to some capacity. So we need to lay out the specifics of that, how that would work, what the process is for applying, and all that sort of thing. So that's an example of a product that someone's gonna write for us, that we're gonna obviously influence, but they're gonna write for us. The rate structure, we've kind of touched on it in these meetings, but it's been very macro, and we need to dive into a little bit more so we can provide, you or anybody else some more specific detail on how we came up with the numbers we have. That requires a lot of number crunching and work from people that have done this a lot more than we have, that do this for a living, and so we're paying someone else to help us do that.
Okay, I think that you answered it at the very end, which is there seems to be a third-party
Yes.
vendor
Yeah,
support
I
for all
could've
this.
said that
Okay.
more, yeah.
Now, with that in mind, and I can imagine there's a structure that comes into putting this sort of stuff in place. Is this an ongoing contractual relationship with this third-party group that the 150 is only intended to cover the initial setup? Or could you talk about what the ongoing cost/relationship is with ongoing,
Yeah,
this
so,
entity?
so just to be clear, where we've gotten to today
Mhm.
started probably 15, 18 months ago.
Yep.
And we've been using a consultant to date, and it'll be the same consultant that carries us through the process.
Okay.
So we've been paying for it up till now. It's just we were fortunate to receive a grant, so the town hasn't had to pay up to this point. So the town starts picking up the bill basically with implementation, that 150. In terms of anything beyond that, once we get what we want out of this implementation process, the ties are severed,
Okay.
and essentially there's no, I suppose if we wanted some additional thing or needed some additional assistance, we would bring someone back, but there's not a recurring cost throughout once we're established, we're done with that contract, ends, and everything's in place, and we're not relying on that consultant for some sort of indefinite period of time where there's additional
Okay.
costs.
By similar token, then, if not the full 150, if the full 150 is not used, does that money then just get turned back over
Yeah.
to free cash? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Beth?
Yeah, hi, I apologize, I did miss some presentation. Am I echoing?
Yeah, we're having some trouble with the audio. Try again,
Do you want me
please.
to type it?
No, go ahead. Now just go ahead. Let's see what happens.
Okay, 'cause I'm hearing an echo, and I'm like trying to check that I have too many devices on that I don't hear you. So I did miss some of your earlier presentations, so I had a couple questions. Are we leading edge on this? How many of our neighboring towns have set up a stormwater system is one of my questions. And then the other one pertains to the credits, because I noticed you're talking about corporations getting credits. Are there things that residents can do to help mitigate this problem on their property and therefore get credit?
So to the first question, across the country, there are thousands of municipalities that have implemented a stormwater fee. In Massachusetts, there are dozens. So we're certainly not pioneering anything or starting something new. It's been in existence for a long time. Across the Commonwealth, there's Mass DEP. You can go to their website and find, their recommendations on doing this. The EPA says this is a best practice. So it's not anything that's kind of leading edge or new. The second question, sorry, forgot.
Are there things that residents can do?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
To earn credit or mitigate themselves?
Yep. So potentially, yes. We have to decide that collectively. So we've established what we think the budget should be, and to get to that budget, we have to raise the revenue through the fee. And so it's essentially a zero sum. So every time we give out a credit, that means we have to balance that, giving out that credit with raising the fee somewhere else. So, so we haven't figured out exactly how we would want to credit and what credit we would want to provide to people, because it's just, we haven't gotten to that point yet. But I think the point is that we need to consider it carefully, and take everybody's position into consideration. But it's anything we give away or give up or waive means we have to make it up somewhere else, and so that's where the kind of the balancing act is.
And what triggered it for me was the fact that you were talking about how a business could mitigate. And I think if a business can mitigate, a homeowner should be able to also mitigate their fees. And I just want you to have that under consideration, that as a town, we tend to treat both our businesses and residents equitably. And so if we're gonna have, if you're gonna, implement like, hey, if you do this for a business, there should be some similar option for residents.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just used the commercial property as an example. When the fees actually, when we actually establish the rate structure, I don't think there's any question that the majority of commercial properties will be paying significantly more than single-family residences, because of the measurement tool and its impervious area. So when you have a bigger building, a bigger parking lot, you're going to be paying more. And so to your point about being equitable, I think that's the point we've tried to make, is that this is an option that does provide some equity, because the bigger properties are paying for their fair share of their contribution to the stormwater system. But I get your point, and we certainly will consider all options for credits. At the end of the day, we'll just have to decide what makes the most sense, for the entire for the entire fund.
Okay. Melanie? Melanie, do you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm probably the slow one on the group, but my sensation for this is that I feel like you have to pass it to know what's in it, and there's no specifics, and I'd hate to get a bunch of people in here voting yes for something, and then suddenly it's a tax that's extraordinary. And I know that's not our intent, but there's still a lot of questions. And when people vote for stuff, when you say, I don't know the when, the where, the why, the how, then it makes me think, well, then why would I vote for it? And if there's no particulars.
Yeah, I don't know that it's exactly, we don't know the when, the where, the why, the how. We have provided in multiple public settings what we think the rate structure will be. I guess I've caveated that at every meeting we've been to with that that's not 100%, because it's not up to me. It's up to really the select board if you go by the bylaw, but certainly you all and input from residents of the town. And so if we say we think we need $1.5 million, which is what we've suggested for a budget, and the rate should be as we've suggested, so about $120 for, or less for 85% of our single-family residences. If you or the town decides that they only want to raise 1.3, or they want to charge less to single-family homes, then that's certainly something we could take back and rerun the numbers and make that adjustment. But that just means, the numbers going up somewhere else for someone else, so probably the commercial properties. So we have provided information that describes the structure and the methodology for how this would work. I guess I'm trying to make it clear that I agree, we don't want to make it sound like you're coming to town meeting and voting for something without knowing what it is. That's certainly not our intent. I just want to make it known that you're not coming to town meeting and you're going to get a fee, a check, a bill in the mail the next day that says a certain amount of money, because that's not what's going to happen. There's still going to have to be time for us to present and for you or select board and others to give guidance, feedback, and steerage to fine tune what we ultimately want. But we're suggesting $1.5 million, and to get there, we've suggested a rate structure to get us there. If that gets massaged higher, lower, I think that's part of the discussion.
But I think the latitude that you're talking about, the higher, the lower part, the uncertainty for people who pay taxes and try and budget, this is concerning because it seems very ambiguous. And voting for something ambiguous, again, if you have to read it to know what's in it or pass it to know what's in it, and it feels uncertain. But I get what you're trying to do, I guess.
I guess maybe another question, this is a rhetorical question, I think, but what's the alternative? And the alternative is we come back to the table with a tax bill, like something that's just going to be applied to your taxes. And so what that means is we come to the town and say, we recommend $1.5 million be added to the DPW budget, and everybody can say that's the way we should do it because we have a voice, and that is an option. But you're taking away some of the value of the utility fund, which is that the property that has, 500,000 square feet of acreage that's covered in impervious area potentially is paying the same, or maybe, when you weigh it out in taxes, they might be paying the same thing you're paying. And so I don't know that that's the best way to do it.
Chris, that's a bit of a Hobson's choice, because there's only one answer, and that answer is we pay, whether we pay through a fee or we pay through tax.
Right.
Right?
And so I guess our point is, because I've said before, when it all comes to at the end of the day, for me, you're asking me to take care of this infrastructure. How we pay for it, like where that money comes from, whether it's from a fee or a tax, it's important to me because I don't want to burden people unnecessarily, but where that money comes from it doesn't really matter when you're talking about paying a bill. So, to your point, I think it needs to be done. And by putting it in a stormwater enterprise fund, we are bucketing it so that we can't pull this money off when something else we think is more important comes up. We say, well, we're just going to kind of kick that down the road till next year because we have this other thing that's more important. That's probably why nationally we're in the state we are with infrastructure, is because it's just too easy to say conceptually right now, oh, this is important, we need to replace that culvert, but when it comes to the actual time to vote for it, there's other things that come up, and sometimes we have a tendency, not speaking for the town, I'm just speaking generally, to kind of shift our priorities because other things pop up.
There is another alternative, but it might be a heavy lift for Westborough, and that's to preserve funds by not voting for stuff at town meeting that we really don't need. But we'll see what happens. Rod?
So just to be clear, on the bylaw, if we ever wanted to change something, it would have to come back to town meeting? Or can the selectmen change something in the bylaw?
The selectmen cannot change anything in the bylaw, no.
So the question I would have is the utility fee exemptions. And the two I would consider having exemptions for, one would be churches or similar nonprofits, and the other would be municipal buildings, because we're just paying fees to then tax ourselves again. So if I was to consider this one, those would be the two things that I would think would make sense.
So one of the edits we made over the course of the last several weeks was specifically to that paragraph, and added to that paragraph was the phrase, it says those exemptions, I'm sorry, and then it also says basically anything else that the select board wants
Okay.
to through a
Okay.
policy.
Okay.
So, so really the select board could exempt anything they want, just putting it in a policy.
Would we be better off voting on it now as opposed to relying on the selectmen? This is a conversation for our committee.
Later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I just, you brought it up, I'll give my 2 cents. I mean,
Yeah.
because once you establish the bylaw, it's a lengthy process to change it. And so leaving it so that you can do it outside the bylaw, which is what that phrase allows us to do. I mean, yes, you're relying on the select board to agree with you,
Yep.
but it does give some flexibility that, keeps it from having to go back through a very lengthy process to change, a phrase or a sentence, so.
Gene?
Back to the discussion about why the enterprise fund versus the taxation. My understanding from some of the prior presentations that we saw, that there were two things that struck me. And one of the slides where you showed the fee structure, we go with the enterprise fund, about 70% of the cost gets picked up by non-residential, whereas with taxes, it's the reverse. And the other thing, I believe, if you have a dedicated fund for this, you're also eligible to apply for certain grants because you have a dedicated funding. Is that correct, or am I?
Well, so we're always eligible to apply for grants, but having funding that is specific to support the activity, so in this case, stormwater
Yeah.
utility fund, it allows you to be more competitive because you actually have the money. You're not banking on getting money from somewhere else.
Right.
You already have money that the town has said, we've allocated money to stormwater. So-
Right. So in terms of why, there is a difference between the raising this through taxation versus
Yeah.
the enterprise.
There is a
fund.
difference, and
Yeah.
the enterprise seems to be a more, let's call it equitable for a moment.
Depends on
your
which seat you're in.
Yes, it depends on which seat you're in, but we're still paying.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? I have a question on exemptions for a moment. Beth, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, go ahead.
So my question goes back, sorry to echo, to this is going to replace your routinely coming to every town meeting and asking for money for stormwater, as has been happening the last few years as this problem sort of got diagnosed and uncovered. I mean, we've seen Derek any number of times saying he had to clear something out, something needed cleaning, something needed fixing. And you're saying that this fund, by its very nature being created, will sort of stop those presentations from being, we have to fix this year. But have you, and I'm assuming it comes with it, that you've done a long-term look to figure out, on average, how much you need per year to make progress?
So to your first part, this will be just like the water and sewer funds. So we still come to town meeting to authorize to spend the money we have in the fund, in the enterprise fund. The difference is it's not coming out of the general budget. It's coming out of a specific fund. So I think I get your point. We're not coming kind of repetitively like we have in the past to take out of the tax budget, but we still have to come back to town meeting to get your authorization to spend any money. So you're gonna approve a budget, an annual budget, and you're gonna approve any sort of capital funding that we might request from a future reserve fund.
All right, Beth?
Yeah.
So I have
And
a
then
question.
She had a second.
Did you have a second? I'm sorry.
Yeah, she was asking about the planning of the amount you needed.
Oh, yeah, the planning. Yes, so the number that we're proposing is based on a plan that says, this funding will allow us to maintain our system. Maintain meaning keep what's functioning and replace what needs to be replaced over time. So that's how we came up with the budget that we're proposing.
Do you know the cycle of the, yeah, I am open. Do you know the cycle of the budget? Like, is this a 20-year maintenance plan or a 30-year? Like, what you're thinking it'll take to, what you're allowing for in terms of turnover?
So this is exactly like a water and sewer budget, meaning it's in perpetuity, because we're always going to have this infrastructure, so we're going to have to maintain it for as long as we want it to work. So there's not a window like in 10 years where we're going to say we don't need this fee anymore.
I'm not saying that,
okay.
but like, what I guess I'm asking is like, certain things last a certain number of years, and then you come back and you start repairing that, like you fix them or do whatever you need to do to take care of them. And you say, oh, they're good for now, but in 10 years we'll be back to do it again.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get a sense of what is the loop that you think you have to go through, because the impression I got in the past was that we were way behind on the storm system. So I assume that you either have to play a lot of catch up, to get through the whole system, or, figure out how to get through it before you start having to repair what you've repaired, if you haven't gotten through everything already. Is that making sense?
Yeah, yes, I think I understand what you're saying. And so typically pipes, culverts, you're talking 50, 75, 100 years, potentially, depending on the environment and the conditions. So this is many decades. There is, infrastructure out there we have to go back and we need to fix now. But I don't want anybody to think I'm painting like this picture that everything's going to fall apart tomorrow. That's not, at least I hope that's not the case. And so as long as we have a consistent, steady approach, we've got a good way ahead. It's the episodic, once in a while funding that is where we get kind of hurt ourselves, because we just do like one specific thing at a time instead of looking at the whole system as a network and maintaining that entire network.
Well, I am definitely in favor of that plan ahead and know where you spend your money next.
Okay. How many culverts do you had this in one of your presentations, is 1,100, is that the number?
204.
204 culverts,
Yeah.
but, and then we have storm drains, and we have catch basins, and we have,
Detention basins,
And
pipe, yes.
how many miles of pipe?
We have it, I don't know the number off the top of my head.
No, I'm
but
just,
it's in-
it's a little levity,
yeah,
it's all
well,
right.
it's a lot.
It's okay. So I have a question on the exemptions. It says that in Section 8, the town will establish exemptions. Obviously, town property will be exempted. I'm assuming that includes the high school football field, or fields, the artificial surfaces. But state, federal, and county properties are subject to the user fee charges. Is that normal, or are we, do you
Yes.
anticipate some exemption for?
That's normal, and it's, again, it's just like they all pay water bills, they all pay sewer
Okay,
bills.
Okay.
And I mean, this isn't just my opinion, this is, I think, industry-wide. Stormwater is a utility, and we're treating it as a utility, and so it's getting treated the same way you treat your water bill and your sewer bill and your electric bill and your cable bill. Those are all fee-for-service, products.
Any other questions on this article and Article 28? Okay, let's move on to Article 29, which is the water use restrictions. To amend the general bylaws, Article 51, with respect to water use restriction. Want to walk us through that one, please, Chris?
So, right now, I mentioned at the select board meeting as well, this is predominantly house cleaning, or housekeeping. We have a current bylaw, we have a current, select board policy. We also have a Water Management Act permit that gives, and all three of those give us guidance on how to impose water restrictions. They're not all completely aligned. It makes it confusing for residents and just anybody really to understand what guidance we're supposed to be following. So this bylaw replaces the current one. Assuming the bylaw passes, we would recommend revising or probably just eliminating the select board policy, and this bylaw would just cover everything. The one exception, the one change, significant change, is that the bylaw would apply not only to users of the public water system, but those with private wells. Because with the thought process being that everybody's drawing essentially from the same water sources, groundwater sources. And so we need to protect the groundwater source, and we're only protecting part of it if we only limit people with public water from using it. And this is consistent with many other towns. The town council that helped us draft this document was part of a session at the state level in terms of the drought management task force and how they produce their documents. And so he had some good insights into other places around the Commonwealth. And so our recommendation is that this should apply to everybody. And it's important to remember, I think, because we had a good discussion at the select board meeting, and these restrictions are applied under certain criteria. It's not we're dictating how people can use their wells all the time. We're saying in a period when we know when water is not as present as we'd like it to be, then we all need to conserve it. And so we all, meaning the whole town. So that's the add to this bylaw that is different than the existing bylaw.
Any questions? Andrew?
Are you aware of any individual citizens that are actively opposed to this, or anybody who may come to us to say that they know that they're not going to be in support of, especially like that element?
I'm not, but I mean, that doesn't mean that there
No,
aren't
of
lots of
course.
people out there that wouldn't agree with it. But yeah, I don't know of anybody.
You can obviously say that anybody could contest this, but if you as the town, you personally or as the town was aware that there's a selection of people that were knowingly upset about this, I guess we just want that insight in advance. But you said you don't know of anybody, so I'll take you at that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I don't want to speculate, I mean, but it is a change for especially
Mhm.
people that have had, it's been this way for probably a long time, so it's a change.
Thank you.
Do you know how many people have private wells, by any chance?
I don't have the number, I can provide it, but it's in the hundreds. So we have over 5,000 connections to our public water system. Private wells were in the hundreds of wells. So that's kind of the order of magnitude difference. Thousands versus hundreds.
Okay. Gene? Sorry, Rod.
I guess, going back to the private well, irrigating private property. I mean, in theory, I know you lose something when it happens, but wouldn't that water be going back into a similar area where it came from?
Evaporates.
Well, part of the restrictions, and these restrictions are the same ones we've been using for years. So it could be as simple as telling people to water your grass, in the morning or in the evening, so that it's not evaporating during the day, which I think is kind of commonly understood technique. But if we don't have any way of kind of changing or forcing that to happen, and people are doing it, then we aren't doing what you just said. We're losing that water. But it's the same for the town water as well. I mean, you're watering your grass with town water, it's going the same place as a well, like a private well. So to me, it's equivalent.
Beth
Yeah,
and Melanie.
sorry. There used to be a concern that town water was treated and therefore more expensive than the groundwater that we're using for
Yep.
irrigation. I agree that all water is equal, but that was a difference in expense. But the other question I have, and I apologize if it's probably a multi-part question, is are there any businesses that are affected by this because they use a lot of water?
Yeah. Beth, you're breaking up again. Can you kind of slow it down and back away from the mic a little bit?
I am nowhere near my.
I think it may be
It's your background.
it's your background, that bridge.
You're too far away. You're in
No,
San
we're
Francisco.
just kidding.
Thank you. All right.
There you go.
So I guess the question is one of the issues related to the expense of treated water versus groundwater that is taken from us? And the other question is whether businesses that are extremely affected by these restrictions.
Did you get that, any of it?
I heard the very
Okay.
first sentence.
Yeah, it's Beth, there's just some problem with your,
Maybe
Your
type it in the
comms.
chat.
what's that?
I can type it in.
Yeah, why don't you type it and, here we go.
And you can address the first question about whether it's treated water versus just groundwater out of the well. That was our first question. I got that one.
I'm not sure what the question
I
is.
think
So she's
people
saying-
used to use wells because it was less expensive, because with treated water, you're also gonna pay the sewer rate on that, right, when you use town water. So some people may have put in
Yeah.
irrigation wells because it'd be less expensive, I
Mhm.
guess. I don't think that makes a point in either direction on this particular question, because that points to then it should apply to wells, but.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that was
I don't know
her
if that
question
was
about
the-
the
Yeah, I guess
differentiation
the-
between the
If
town water
she
being
can
treated.
clarify, I guess, but I guess my answer, if I understood correctly, the purpose for this bylaw is to make sure we have enough water to supply the town during times of drought. And so if we're not conserving all of our water, then there's a potential, and there always is, that we could not have the water we need. And so that's why we think it should apply to everybody, because everybody's benefiting from the water. And it's not, I mean, when the fire department comes to your house, they're not tapping into your well, they're tapping into a public fire hydrant to put out a fire on a property that uses a private well. But that water that's being used to put out the fire at your house is coming from the town. And so if we don't have that water to supply, then that's a problem. And we all participate in making sure that water's available, so.
Beth, did you finish typing?
Yep.
No?
Can you read that second question?
Okay, do businesses that use do businesses that use water heavily have a plan for accommodation? Is that correct, Beth? She's nodding her head, so.
So this restriction, or this bylaw would apply to everybody, including our businesses? Is that Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Walter, go ahead.
So, my understanding is, we start running out of water, then we typically say, we start implementing restrictions in the effort to not actually get to the point where you can't use it at all, right? Is that correct? There's a set of steps?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess I would support this because I would suppose that if the people with wells are also following those same restrictions, like not watering their lawn in the middle of the day, like when you drive by a lot of places and the sprinklers are on rainy days and things, that would help us all from getting to maybe the next level with more, I don't want to call it onerous, but more restrictions. That's part of the intent, isn't it, by covering everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we're drawing water from the same place. And so if the town stops drawing water, but other people aren't stopping, then you're not really conserving as much as you think you are.
So we have this giant aquifer under the town of Westborough, let's say.
Multiple,
That-
but yes,
Multiple
Yes.
aquifers.
yes.
Yeah, okay, because my understanding of how the water is flowing underground is it generally follows the crevices. Is that your understanding as
Yeah,
well?
yes,
Okay. So the wells, the private wells, when they drill them, they tap for a particular crevice where there's a sufficient flow. I don't know whether
Yes.
it's 5 gallons a
Generally, yeah.
minute or whatever.
yes, yes.
Okay, so it's not this giant swimming pool under us that we're all tapping into.
I thought that's what you were saying, but yes, we are all tapping
Tapping
into the
into
same
this big
sources.
swimming pool.
We're,
Yeah.
yes, there might be multiple swimming pools, but we're all
Okay.
the straw is sucking water out of the same
Okay.
pool from
All right.
everybody is.
Okay. All right.
It's not your private pool, I guess, is
Yeah.
the way to say it.
Okay, that's, all right. Because that was, that's a big change in the restrictions.
It is, and
Yeah.
I acknowledge that there will probably be people that, may not be supportive, but I'm just bringing what I think is the best recommendation to the town to manage our water supply.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to the next article, and I think this one's pretty simple, Chris. Article 37, which was the
Accepting a street.
accepting the street. I think did you cover this in your budget summit
I
presentation?
did, but I can just,
Could you just
summarize. Yep.
refresh our
So-
memory, please?
this hasn't happened a whole lot recently, but it's basically routine for the town. So the town develops, authorizes the development, say, of a subdivision, and once that subdivision finishes its work, at some point, that developer gives the road to the town, essentially. And so we assume responsibility for the road and all the utilities associated with it. So at this point, for this specific road, the developer's done and met all the requirements that are necessary for us to accept it. And so we accept it as a road, and we take ownership of all the utilities that are associated with that road.
Any questions on that, Walter?
Yeah, is there some I think you alluded to this, but there is a process where we make sure they did
Yes.
the quality or
Yeah.
whatever that they were
Yes.
supposed to, there's enough gravel under it or whatever, that we're not accepting a
Yes.
disaster.
Yeah, because anything we inherit, like, we own it once
Yeah.
once we take it. So, so yes, and in this particular road, it's been bumped to a couple of meetings, town meetings, basically, because we needed to figure some of those things out and get those things to the condition they should be for us to accept it.
And that's part of the inspections that go on as a development's
Yep.
being made?
Yes.
Too, as well?
Yep.
Gene?
I'm not suggesting that we don't accept the road, but I'm curious as to what would happen if we didn't. Will the builder be required to maintain that in perpetuity?
I don't know the legalities. I'm sure at some point there's some, I would imagine there's some trigger at some point that says, that there was an expectation that the town would take this. And so, I don't know what that threshold is,
Yep.
but if they've met all of their requirements, I suspect that from a legal perspective, at some point, we would have to do something. I don't know if that's for sure, but I think that's a reasonable expectation, so.
Yeah,
Somebody-
and if not a legal expectation, there would be lawyers, so there would be
Oh,
a
I know
legal
that,
burden.
yeah.
Certainly,
So, yeah, but I think very much to your point, that would be, it would come down to lawsuits. If it's anything like the schools and wrapping up projects like that, it comes a time where lawyers would get involved, and that doesn't save anybody money.
Or there would be somebody from the 17 or 1800s that is into the town for a big bill because they developed some property. So, anyway, any other questions on this article? Okay, Chris, thank you very, very much for joining us this evening, taking time away.
And
Derek, thank you as well for being here.
Thank you.
And we're going to move on to other business.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So the discussion on the sewer rates is not going to go?
Oh, hang on a second. Thank you.
Uh-oh, Derek's gone.
Well, that's
The
all right.
Water and Sewer Commissioner.
Yeah, the Water and Sewer Commissioner. I'm sorry.
Put on your
So,
other hat.
Why don't you go ahead and ask your question again that you,
No, I'm still, I don't, and I asked you this in person. It'd be nice if we had a clearer understanding of how the water and sewer rates are established. From what I see, it looks like, based on the way they're developed right now, it contributes to a pretty good reserve fund. And I don't know if that's part of how they get set, that they anticipate trying to create a reserve, or how all that gets put together. But
Are you specifically asking about the reserve, like how we get it, or?
Yeah.
Because that's in our financial policy. It says
Policies.
5% minimum for water and sewer.
So when you establish those rates, you add 5% to establish a reserve?
Uh,
In other words, you have the costs, and then based on how much you anticipate being used,
Yes.
I would anticipate that.
No,
sets
no,
the co-
really no difference. I don't know exactly how the general budget works, but it's the same principle. We have a percentage we want to keep in free cash and in our stabilization fund, and so that's factored into our rates so that we can ensure we meet that requirement for the town.
So the rate, there's some amount you have to spend during the year operationally, and then if you were falling behind on a 5% reserve, there might be some amount added to that to get you back to that reserve.
Added to the rates?
Yeah. Or if you had an overage of things, you might, I don't know,
reduce the rates?
reduce it. I guess you use that for capital, you don't really use it
Yeah,
for operational.
I don't think we're ever going to have an overage that's
Okay.
not going to be spent.
right.
Yeah.
Because, and I don't say that that's not a joke. I mean, that's just, we have lots of requirements. I mean,
Right.
go back to the stormwater discussion. By the time we get to here, we've already gone through a department review where we've crossed things off because we've been given guidance to stay at 2% or level fund or whatever. And then we go to the town manager review, and that's, there's some discussion there as to how important these things are. And then we get to here, and we do more of that based on your questions or guidance. So our budget that we have, just like in your home, doesn't cover every single thing we ever want to do. There's things that we still want to do,
Right.
but we just don't fund them because we prioritize other things, just like we do in our houses. So I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we've got money that's just excess, for lack of a better word.
So if I can be more specific, and I know you don't have the numbers in front of you, so I'm just, this is more a general
best
question
thing.
in terms of how
Yeah,
things get
somebody-
done. So in the revenue from sewer for 2024, estimated is $11,237,000. And the number's not that important. It is important, but not for the point I'm trying to make. The budget for expenses for the sewer enterprise and wastewater treatment plant in 2024 is about $8 million. So where is it? Guess I'm not clear how you get from 11 to 8. Maybe it's interest payments or things like that, but I'd be curious to know.
Are you just looking at, like, is that page just the DPW page?
Yeah,
So there's a separate page that talks about debt service,
okay,
under the debt service
Yeah.
annex of the budget.
Yeah.
So I can tell you we don't have an extra $4 million just coming in.
Yeah, I
every
can't
year.
imagine.
mean, if
you
we
do.
did,
I'm just trying to understand how,
Yeah.
it'd be nice if we had it all in one place that we
Yeah.
could understand it. Which is the point I've been trying to make.
I mean, I'm happy to have like a further discussion, looking at the numbers and talking about it,
Yeah.
but we don't just have extra money coming in. Our reserves are, just like really our free cash is just kind of built off of the revenue we brought in. Maybe we brought in more this year than we expected for whatever reason, permits or whatever, and so that just,
Yeah.
we bring in more.
Yeah.
And then we come up with a plan to spend it on capital instead of having to borrow, which, in some cases might make sense, but we don't want to borrow every single year, because then eventually all we're doing is paying for our debt, so.
Yeah, no, it'd be helpful if there was an easy path to follow.
Why make your job any easier?
I've been
Your
trying,
volunteer-
Mike.
Your volunteer job. Why make it any easier? Is there an analysis going on right now, Chris? I understand that we're doing some kind of analysis on the rates.
For the water rates, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, when do you think that'll be done?
This spring, hopefully, that's the goal, so April, May, maybe.
Okay. And the mechanics are
The
that
the intent is that it's feeding the next year's budget cycle.
the mechanics just of setting the rates, is the data is presented to you by the finance director?
Yep.
And then within a range, you're the one who establishes
Yes,
the actual rates?
yes.
Okay.
Do you establish the rates, or do you make a recommendation to the select board?
I established the rates,
Okay.
DPW, yep.
But for the stormwater,
The bu-
after, you would
for
make a
stormwater,
recommendation to
the
the
bylaw
select
says
board?
the select board would do it.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, sorry to
No,
pull you back, but, yeah.
all right, thank you.
Thank you again,
Thank you.
Chris. Have a good evening. Okay. Next order of business, approving the minutes of March 2nd. May I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes of March 2nd.
Second?
Bradley, second?
We have a second. Beth, any discussion? Walter, thank you again.
Those are long ones.
Long minutes.
3 guests.
Three
Plus, we
guests.
had our own discussion,
Plus
so
we
it's kind
had-
of like having 4.
Thankfully, we have Westborough TV as a backstop.
We do.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, Beth?
Ludwig, yes.
Boy,
Melanie?
muted.
Melanie, I think you're muted. Melanie?
Board abstain.
Bradley, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon abstain?
Shafford, yes?
Moretti, yes.
And Z, I
Z
think,
is
is
not-
temporarily not with us, so
Our
that would,
doctor has left.
2, 3,
Okay.
4, 5, 6, 2, 8 present.
Okay, motion is approved. Are there any liaison reports? Okay. Future draft agendas. On Thursday, we begin voting on the articles. And we'll outline the process at the beginning of the meeting. I'm going to ask, I know we're hybrid, but when it comes to voting and the discussions, it always seems like in-person attendance is, it gives us a more robust dialogue. So I'm going to strongly encourage all of you to please attend in person if at all possible. Okay? Any questions? All right. So may I have a motion to adjourn our meeting?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Beth?
Lundberg, yes.
Melanie?
Yes.
Bradley, yes.
Nolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, yes?
Moretti, yes.
8-0.
We are adjourned. Thank you all again. See you Thursday.